Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands as the emergency alarm echoed through the mining station's corridors. He'd been elbow-deep in the atmospheric recycling unit when the piercing sound cut through the mechanical hum that usually filled Outpost Kepler 7. Emergency alarms meant one thing out here on the Rim Worlds. Something had gone very wrong, very fast. All personnel to emergency stations, came the crackling voice over the intercom. Unknown vessel detected on emergency approach vector. Prepare for potential crash landing. Marcus grabbed his toolkit and headed for the main hangar. As the station's chief technician, he'd be needed if whatever was coming down needed immediate repairs. The outpost sat on a barren moon orbiting a gas giant, serving as a refueling stop for deep space cargo haulers. They saw maybe one ship a week, so an emergency landing was big news. The hangar doors were already cycling open when he arrived, revealing the star-filled void beyond the atmospheric barrier. In the distance, a streak of fire was growing larger against the purple nebula that dominated their night sky. The ship was coming in too fast and at the wrong angle. Marcus could tell, just by looking, that this wasn't going to be a gentle touchdown. "Clear the landing pad," shouted Commander Walsh, the station's ranking officer. Emergency foam deployment in 30 seconds. The vessel hit the landing pad with a tremendous crash that shook the entire hangar. It was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen before. The hull gleamed with an almost organic sheen, and its shape defied conventional engineering. Instead of the angular, practical designs humans used, this craft curved and flowed like it had been grown rather than built. Steam hissed from damaged sections of the hull as the emergency foam settled. Through the clearing vapor, Marcus could see scorch marks and what looked like weapon damage along the ship's sides. Someone had been shooting at this thing, and recently. "Life signs," Commander Walsh called out to Technician Park, who was scanning with a portable sensor array. "One occupant, still alive, but barely," Park replied, his voice tight with concern. "Whatever's in there is big, and its biology doesn't match anything in our databases." Marcus was already moving toward the ship before Walsh gave the order. His training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation, establish priorities, save lives first. The ship's main hatch was sealed, but he could see where the locking mechanism had been damaged in the crash. His plasma cutter would make quick work of it. "Careful, Chun," Walsh warned. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." "Injured is injured, sir," Marcus replied, igniting his cutter. "Whatever's in there needs help, and they chose to land here instead of somewhere else. That says something." The hatch fell away with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. The air that flowed out was breathable, but carried strange scents, ozone, and something that reminded him of thunderstorms. Marcus peered into the dim interior and immediately understood why the sensors had detected such a large life form. Coiled in the ship's main cabin was a dragon. Not the mythical creatures from old Earth legends, but something that definitely deserved the name. It was easily 20 feet long, with scales that shifted from deep silver to pure white along its body. Crystalline spines ran along its back, and, even unconscious, it possessed an undeniable majesty. What struck Marcus most was its coloring. The creature was almost entirely albino, with scales like polished pearl and just the faintest hint of blue around the edges. The dragon was breathing, but shallow, dark fluid that might have been blood pooled beneath several wounds along its flanks. Smaller injuries covered its hide, and one wing hung at an unnatural angle. Sweet stars above, breathed Technician Park, who had followed Marcus to the hatch. "Is that actually a dragon?" "Doesn't matter what we call it," Marcus said, stepping carefully into the ship. "It's hurt, and it needs help." The dragon's head lifted slightly as he approached, revealing eyes like chips of blue ice. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw intelligence there, not just animal awareness, but real understanding. The creature made a sound, low and musical, that somehow didn't seem threatening despite coming from something that could easily bite him in half. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, the same tone he'd use with a frightened animal. "We're going to help you." He knelt beside one of the larger wounds and examined it carefully. The injury was deep, but clean, like it had been made by an energy weapon. The edges were cauterized, which probably explained why the dragon hadn't bled out during its journey. Marcus opened his toolkit and pulled out a medical scanner, not designed for alien biology, but it might give him some useful information. Fascinating, he murmured, reading the results. Body temperature is higher than human normal, but not by much. Bone density is off the charts, but that makes sense for something this size. And these wounds, he frowned at the scanner's display. The tissue damage is consistent with military-grade plasma weapons. Commander Walsh's voice echoed from the hangar entrance. Chen, what's the situation in there? One injured alien, approximately 20 feet long, appears to be some kind of large reptilian species, Marcus called back. Multiple wounds from energy weapons. It's stable, but needs immediate medical attention. Alien, Walsh sounded incredulous. As in, not from any known species. Sir, unless there's a whole catalog of spacefaring dragons that nobody told me about, then, yes, this is definitely alien. The dragon made that musical sound again, and this time Marcus was sure he heard pain in it. He'd worked with enough injured people to recognize suffering when he heard it, regardless of species. The creature was looking directly at him now, those pale blue eyes fixed on his face with unmistakable intelligence. What do you need? Marcus asked softly, feeling only slightly ridiculous for talking to something that probably didn't understand a word he was saying. To his amazement, the dragon lifted its head slightly and looked toward a section of its ship's wall. Marcus followed its gaze and saw what looked like a storage compartment. When he opened it, he found containers filled with what was obviously medical supplies, though designed for a physiology very different from human. Smart, he said, looking back at the dragon with new respect. You're trying to tell me where your medical kit is. The dragon's head dipped once in what looked remarkably like a nod. Marcus spent the next hour working on the creature's wounds. The alien medical supplies were surprisingly similar to human equivalents, though the tools were sized for much larger patients. He cleaned the injuries, applied what seemed to be healing gel from one of the containers, and used his own equipment to stabilize the broken wing. Throughout the process, the dragon remained perfectly still, watching him work with those intelligent eyes. Occasionally, it would make soft sounds that Marcus began to interpret as guidance, warning him when he was about to touch a particularly sensitive spot or indicating approval when he did something correctly. There, he said finally, sitting back on his heels. That should hold you until we can get you to a proper medical facility. Though I have to admit, I'm not sure where we'd find a xenobiologist qualified to treat dragons. The dragon lifted its great head and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. Then, slowly and deliberately, it lowered its head until its snout was just inches from Marcus's chest. The gesture felt profound, almost ceremonial. Marcus reached out instinctively and placed his hand on the warm scales of the dragon's forehead. You're welcome, he said softly. Commander Walsh appeared at the hatch opening. How's our guest doing? Stable, for now, Marcus replied. But, sir, this isn't just any alien. This creature is intelligent. I mean, really intelligent. It guided me through treating its own injuries. Walsh studied the dragon with new interest. Recommendations? We set up the main conference room as a temporary medical bay. Keep the environment warm and humid. I think that's what its physiology prefers. And, sir? Marcus looked back at the dragon, which was still watching their conversation with obvious understanding. We treat it as a guest, not a specimen. Something tells me that's going to be very important. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself spending most of his free time with the dragon. He'd managed to rig up a translation device using the station's computer and some software designed for first contact scenarios. Progress was slow, but they were beginning to communicate. The dragon's name, as near as the translator could manage, was Zephyrion. It was a long way from home, fleeing something it called the Devourers, a name that sent chills down Marcus's spine when he heard the way Zephyrion's voice changed when speaking of them. The ship had been damaged in a running battle that had lasted days. My people, Zephyrion said one evening, the translator rendering its musical language in a slightly stilted but understandable English. Do not often encounter your species. We have heard stories, but stories can be incomplete. What kind of stories? Marcus asked. They were sitting in the conference room, which had become Zephyrian's recovery space. The dragon was much larger than the furniture, but it seemed comfortable enough coiled on the reinforced flooring Marcus had installed. That humans are young and reckless, that you fight often among yourselves, that your technology advances faster than your wisdom. Zephyrian's great head tilted thoughtfully, but also that you are adaptable, resourceful, that you do not abandon those who need help. Marcus laughed. Sounds about right on all counts. We're not perfect, but we try. You saved my life without knowing anything about me or my people. This was not strategically wise. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But it was the right thing to do. Zephyrion made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, but somehow Marcus understood it as agreement mixed with approval. My people have a concept, Zephyrion continued. Translated poorly, it means life debt. When one saves another at risk to themselves, a bond is created that transcends individual lifetimes. That sounds like a pretty heavy responsibility. It is not a burden, Zephyrion said, and this time its voice carried warmth even through the mechanical translation. It is an honor, a recognition that some acts create connections stronger than law or custom. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure he understood the implications. 2 weeks later, Zephyrian's injuries had healed enough for travel. A ship had been dispatched from the nearest diplomatic station to transport the dragon to the proper authorities. First contact with a new sapient species was too important to handle at a frontier outpost. Will I see you again? Marcus asked as they prepared Zephyrian's ship for the journey to the diplomatic station. The galaxy is vast, Zephyrion replied, but the bonds between those who have shared honor are not easily broken. I will not forget the human technician who treated an injured stranger with kindness. Marcus watched as the strange, beautiful ship lifted off from the hangar deck and disappeared into the star field beyond the atmospheric barrier. Life on Outpost Kepler 7 returned to its normal routine of maintenance schedules and cargo manifests. But sometimes during the quiet hours of his shift, Marcus would find himself looking up at the stars and wondering about his unusual friend. He learned enough about Zephyrian's people to know that dragons lived much longer than humans. Centuries, possibly millennia. Would Zephyrion even remember their brief encounter as the years passed? Marcus filed his official report about the first contact incident and went back to his work maintaining the outpost systems. He had no way of knowing that across the galaxy, in halls of crystal and starlight, his name was being spoken with reverence by creatures that had ruled space lanes before humanity had discovered fire. He had no way of knowing that a life debt, once sworn, was considered by Zephyrian's people to be as permanent and unbreakable as the laws of physics themselves. And he had no way of knowing that 15 years later, when humanity found itself facing a threat beyond anything they had ever imagined, an albino dragon would remember a human technician's kindness and change the course of galactic history. 15 years had changed Marcus Chun in the way that time changes all people. His hair showed silver at the temples now, and the lines around his eyes spoke of countless hours squinting at technical diagrams and delicate repairs. He'd been promoted twice since his days on Outpost Kepler 7, and now served as chief engineering officer aboard the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced deep space exploration vessel. The Defiance was 3 days out from Proxima Station when the first reports started coming in. At first, it was just static-filled transmissions from the outer colonies, fragmented words about ships going missing, and strange readings on long-range sensors. Then, the emergency broadcast began, and Marcus found himself standing in the ship's command center watching footage that made his blood run cold. The Devourers had found humanity. The creatures in the grainy surveillance videos defied easy description. They moved through space in ships that looked more like metallic tumors than anything built by intelligence. When they attacked, they didn't just destroy their targets. They consumed them, breaking down matter at the molecular level and incorporating it into their ever-growing fleet. Estimated time to reach Earth? Asked Captain Morrison, a stern woman who'd earned her command during the Tau Ceti campaign. At their current rate of advance, 18 months, reported Commander Park, the same technician who'd been with Marcus at Kepler 7 all those years ago, now serving as the ship's tactical officer. But, Captain, they're not just moving in a straight line. They're consuming everything in their path. Every ship, every station, every inhabited world. We're looking at the complete sterilization of human space. Marcus studied the tactical display showing the Devourers' advance. The alien fleet moved like a plague of locusts, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Humanity's military was mobilizing, but early engagement reports were catastrophic. Human weapons seemed to barely scratch the alien ships, while entire battle groups were being devoured in minutes. "Sir," Marcus said, an idea forming in his mind. "I'd like permission to access the classified First Contact archives." Captain Morrison turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Something specific you're looking for, Chief?" 15 years ago, I encountered a species that mentioned these things. Called them by name, the Devourers. If there's any intelligence out there about how to fight them, that's where we'll find it. Granted. Commander Park, assist Chief Chun with the archive search. I want everything we can find about hostile encounters with these entities. Marcus and Park spent the next 6 hours diving through classified files, first contact reports, and xenological surveys. Most of the information was fragmentary, scattered references to the Devourers in the logs of various alien species humanity had encountered over the years. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its consistency. The Devourers had been a plague on the galaxy for millions of years. They appeared without warning, consumed everything in their path, then vanished back into the void between galaxies. No one knew where they came from or what drove them. Previous invasions had devastated entire stellar civilizations, leaving behind only empty systems and the warning tales of survivors. "Here's something interesting," Park said, highlighting a section of a diplomatic report. "The Draconic hegemony has fought them before. Multiple times, apparently. They're one of the few species with any record of successful resistance." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. The Draconic hegemony? You recognize the name? Maybe. Marcus accessed his personal files and pulled up his old report from Kepler 7. Does this look familiar? He displayed the images they'd taken of Zephyrian's ship with its organic curves and crystalline components. Park whistled softly. "That's definitely hegemony design. How did you— Wait, this is that dragon you helped, isn't it? From the first contact incident. His name was Zephyrion. And if his people have fought the Devourers before and won, then we need to find him." Captain Morrison studied Marcus's report with growing interest. "Chief, this dragon of yours, did he mention anything about tactics or weapons that worked against these things?" Marcus shook his head. "We only had basic translation working. But Captain, he specifically mentioned a life debt. In his culture, that apparently means something significant." "How significant?" "Significant enough that he said it transcends individual lifetimes." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display where the red markers of the Devourer fleet crept steadily toward human space. "Commander Park, give me a communications link to the Hegemony Embassy at Alpha Centauri. Priority Alpha encryption." "Captain," Park said carefully, "the Draconic Hegemony doesn't typically respond to human communications. They consider us too young for meaningful diplomatic contact. Then, we'll have to hope that Chief Chin's dragon friend feels differently." The transmission took 6 hours to reach Alpha Centauri and another 12 for response. When it came, it wasn't what any of them had expected. Instead of a diplomatic form letter, the response was a set of coordinates and a single-word message, "Come." The Defiance altered course immediately, pushing their engines to maximum sustainable speed. The coordinates led them to a system on the edge of human space that officially contained nothing but gas giants and asteroid fields. Unofficially, it turned out to house something much more impressive. The hegemony ship that met them, there was the largest artificial construct Marcus had ever seen. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, its hull covered in the same organic-looking armor he remembered from Zephyrian's vessel, but on a scale that defied comprehension. Crystalline spires jutted from its surface like mountains, and the whole thing seemed to pulse with its own internal light. UES Defiance, came a voice over their communications system, rendered in perfect English with only the faintest musical undertone. You are cleared for Docking Bay 7. A delegation awaits you. The docking bay could have held a dozen ships the size of the Defiance. As their shuttle touched down on the polished deck, Marcus felt a strange mixture of nervous anticipation and homecoming. The air that flowed into their shuttle when the doors opened carried that same ozone scent he remembered from years before. 3 dragons waited for them in the docking bay. The 2 flanking the central figure were magnificent specimens, one deep gold with red highlights, the other a rich purple that seemed to absorb light. But it was the dragon in the center that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Zephyrion had grown larger in the intervening years, and his albino scales now held hints of blue and silver that hadn't been there before. But those pale eyes were exactly as Marcus remembered them, and they fixed on him with unmistakable recognition and warmth. Marcus Chun, Zephyrion said, his voice carrying easily across the enormous space. You have aged. This is good. It means you have lived well. Marcus found himself grinning despite the dire circumstances that had brought them here. Hello, old friend. I wish we were meeting again under better circumstances. As do I. But the life debt sworn in small spaces holds true even in the vastness of crisis. Come, there is much we must discuss. They were escorted through corridors that seemed designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls were carved from some kind of crystal that provided its own illumination, and the architectural style flowed like frozen music. Marcus realized he was seeing the aesthetic of a species that had been building among the stars since before humanity had developed language. The chamber they were brought to was clearly a military briefing room, despite its alien beauty. Holographic displays showed star charts and tactical information, while crystalline formations around the walls pulsed with data streams. Several more dragons were present, including one ancient specimen whose scales were so pale they were almost transparent. I am Counselor Shimmerwing, the elderly dragon said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. I speak for the Hegemony Council in this matter. You seek aid against the Devourers. We do, Captain Morrison replied. Our weapons are ineffective against them. Our ships are being consumed faster than we can build them. Without help, humanity will be extinct within 2 years. The Devourers are an ancient plague, Shimmerwing said. They have consumed the homes of countless species. The hegemony itself lost 12 worlds in the last great incursion, 3,000 years ago. But you survived, Marcus said. You fought them off. We endured, Zephyrion corrected. There is a difference. The Devourers cannot be defeated in the way you think of victory. They can only be discouraged, made to seek easier prey elsewhere. Commander Park leaned forward. What does that mean, practically speaking? Another dragon, this one bearing scars across its hide, spoke up. I am Battle Leader Stormcrest. I commanded fleets against the Devourers in their last incursion. The key to surviving them is understanding what they truly are. Stormcrest gestured, and the holographic displays shifted to show microscopic images of something that looked like metallic viruses. The Devourers are not a species in the conventional sense. They're a form of weaponized nanotechnology that achieves sentience. They consume matter to reproduce themselves, and they spread across the galaxy like a plague because that is literally what they are, a self-replicating weapon created by a species that died out millions of years ago. Nanotechnology, Marcus said, his engineering mind immediately grasping the implications. Then, conventional weapons would be useless. You need to disrupt their programming at the quantum level. Precisely, Stormcrest said, looking at him with approval. Your species may be young, but your technical aptitude is remarkable. This is why the hegemony has chosen to offer aid despite your brief existence. Counselor Shimmerwing gestured, and new displays activated showing ship designs Marcus had never seen before. The hegemony will provide humanity with quantum disruption technology. Ships equipped with these weapons can unmake Devourer vessels, breaking down their nanotechnological structure. In exchange for what? Captain Morrison asked suspiciously. Zephyrion made a sound that might have been laughter. The life debt, Captain Morrison. Marcus Chun saved my life without thought of reward or strategic advantage. The hegemony honors such debts. Consider this payment for a kindness shown in a distant place. Marcus felt overwhelmed. Zephyrion, I just did what anyone would have done. No, the albino dragon replied softly. You do what a good being would do. There is a difference, and that difference is why humanity deserves to survive this trial. The transfer of technology took 3 days. Hegemony engineers worked alongside human technicians to retrofit the Defiance with quantum disruption arrays. Marcus found himself working directly with Zephyrion, just as he had 15 years before, though now they were installing weapons instead of treating injuries. Your people learn quickly, Zephyrion observed as Marcus successfully calibrated a disruption matrix on his 3rd attempt. The techniques that took our younglings decades to master, your engineers accomplish in hours. We've had to learn quickly, Marcus said, making fine adjustments to the crystal alignment. When you're the new species in a dangerous galaxy, adaptation is survival. This is wisdom. It is also why the hegemony believes humanity will not only survive the Devourers, but grow stronger from the experience. Marcus paused in his work. You really think we can do this? Zephyrion's great head turned to look at him directly. I think that a species capable of producing individuals who will risk themselves for strangers is capable of anything. The Devourers consume matter and energy, but they do not understand sacrifice or compassion. Those qualities are your greatest weapons. On the final day, as the Defiance prepared to depart with its new armaments, Zephyrion walked Marcus to the docking bay. The dragon moved with the easy grace of something perfectly at home in the massive spaces of the hegemony ship. This is not goodbye, Zephyrion said as they reached the shuttle. When the Devourers are gone, there will be other challenges. The galaxy is vast and often dangerous. Humanity will need allies. And the hegemony? The hegemony remembers its debts. But more than that, we value courage and kindness. Your species is both in abundance. Marcus extended his hand, and Zephyrion lowered his great head to touch it gently with his snout, the same gesture they'd shared years ago on a distant outpost. Thank you, Marcus said, for everything. Thank you, Marcus Chun, for showing an old dragon that sometimes the greatest strength comes in the smallest acts of decency. As the Defiance departed the hidden system, Marcus watched the magnificent hegemony ship disappear into the starfield. But this time, he wasn't wondering if he'd see his friend again. He was planning for a future where humanity and the draconic hegemony would stand together among the stars, partners in the great work of protecting the innocent and building something better than what had come before. The real war was just beginning. The Battle of Luna changed everything. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the U.S. Defiance, watching human and hegemony ships fight side by side against the nightmare that had emerged from deep space. The quantum disruption arrays worked exactly as promised. Wherever the combined fleet focused their fire, Devourer vessels came apart like sand castles hit by waves. But for every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. 6 months had passed since humanity's first contact with hegemony technology. The initial victories had been intoxicating. Human ships equipped with quantum disruptors had stopped the Devourer advance cold, buying precious time to evacuate the outer colonies and fortify the core worlds. For a brief moment, it had seemed like the nightmare might be ending. Then, the Devourers adapted. Chief Chun to the bridge, came Captain Morrison's voice over the intercom. Priority 1. Marcus made his way through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy. The Defiants had been refitted twice since their first encounter with hegemony technology, and now bristled with weapons that bent the laws of physics. But even with all their new capabilities, the ship felt small and fragile against what they were facing. On the bridge, the main display showed a tactical situation that made Marcus's stomach clench. The Devourer fleet had changed tactics entirely. Instead of the individual ships they'd faced before, the enemy had consolidated into massive formations that pulsed with shared energy. They'd learned to link their defenses, making each group exponentially more difficult to destroy. They're not just adapting, Commander Park reported grimly. They're evolving in real time. Each engagement teaches them something new about our capabilities. Captain Morrison turned as Marcus arrived. Chief, we're getting reports that our quantum disruptors are losing effectiveness. The enemy ships are developing resistance to the frequencies we're using. That should be impossible, Marcus said, studying the tactical data. The quantum disruption works at the fundamental level of matter organization. You can't develop immunity to having your atoms scattered. Tell that to them, Morrison said, pointing at the display where a Devourer formation was shrugging off concentrated fire from 3 human destroyers. We need solutions, and we need them fast. Marcus was about to respond when new contacts appeared on the edge of the sensor grid. The signatures were unmistakable, hegemony ships, but not the massive dreadnoughts they'd fought alongside before. These were smaller, sleeker vessels that moved with predatory grace. Incoming transmission, reported the communications officer. It's addressed specifically to Chief Chun. The main screen shifted to show a familiar albino dragon. Zephyrion looked older somehow, his scales bearing new scars that spoke of recent battles. Behind him, Marcus could see the interior of what was clearly a military vessel. Marcus Chun, Zephyrion said, his voice carrying across the void. The time has come for desperate measures. We have detected the emergence of a prime node among the Devourer fleet. Prime node? Captain Morrison stepped forward. What does that mean? It means the Devourers have achieved something they have not accomplished in over 1,000,000 years, Zephyrion replied. They have created a central intelligence capable of coordinating their entire force as a single entity. If we do not stop it now, they will become unstoppable not just for humanity, but for all life in this galaxy. Marcus felt cold dread settle in his stomach. What do you need us to do? The prime node is housed within a construct the size of a small moon, protected by the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled. Conventional weapons, even quantum disruptors, cannot penetrate its defenses. We must use older methods. The display changed to show technical specifications that made Marcus's head spin. The device Zephyrion was describing looked like a fusion of technology and pure energy, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. This is a void render, Zephyrion continued. It creates a controlled implosion in space-time itself, powerful enough to destroy the prime node. But it must be delivered directly to the target, and whoever carries it will not survive the mission. Captain Morrison was quiet for a long moment. How many ships would you need for the escort? Every ship we can muster, Zephyrion said bluntly. Human and hegemony forces combined. And even then, success is not guaranteed. I'll carry it, Marcus said quietly. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at him. Zephyrion's eyes widened in what Marcus had learned to recognize as surprise in dragon expressions. Marcus, Zephyrion said carefully, you do not understand what you are offering. The void render must be manually activated from within the prime node. There is no possibility of escape. I understand perfectly, Marcus replied, and I'm still volunteering. Captain Morrison stepped forward. Chief, I appreciate the gesture, but we need you alive. You're one of the few people who understands both human and hegemony technology. Captain, with respect, we need someone who knows the technology well enough to improvise if things go wrong. And We need someone the hegemony trusts completely. Marcus looked directly at Zephyrion. The life debt works both ways, doesn't it? You saved all of humanity when you shared your technology with us. Zephyrion made a sound that the translators couldn't interpret, but Marcus heard both sorrow and pride in it. Marcus Chun, you honor me and terrify me in equal measure. Yes, I will carry you to the Prime Node. But I want you to know, among my people, you are already considered a legend. The human who showed kindness to a stranger has become the human who offers his life for beings he will never meet. The combined fleet assembled at Proxima Station was the largest military force humanity had ever put together. 200 human vessels, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble fighters, joined with 50 hegemony ships whose crystalline hulls glowed like captured stars. At the center of the formation, Zephyrion's personal ship carried the Void Render and one very determined human engineer. Marcus had spent the 3-day journey to the battle site, working with hegemony technicians to understand the device he would be carrying. The Void Render was elegant in its simplicity, a crystalline matrix that, when activated, would create a cascade failure in the fundamental structure of reality within a limited area. The explosion would last only seconds, but those seconds would be enough to unmake anything caught in the effect. Remember, Zephyrion said as they approached the Devourer fleet, you must place the device at the exact center of the Prime Node's core. The construct will attempt to defend itself, but its defenses are designed to repel external attacks. It will not expect someone to be inside its structure. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. The environmental suit was a hybrid of human and hegemony technology, capable of surviving in a hostile environment inside a Devourer construct. The Void Render itself was small enough to carry, though its weight seemed to press against reality itself. Zephyrion, Marcus said as they drew closer to their target, I want you to know, these past months working with your people have been the best of my life. Whatever happens today, I'm grateful for the chance to be part of something bigger than myself. The feeling is mutual, my friend. Your species has taught the hegemony that age does not always bring wisdom, and that sometimes the newest voices carry the most important truths. The battle began as soon as they entered the Devourer perimeter. The enemy fleet was even larger than intelligence had suggested, thousands of ships in formations that moved like living things. But the combined human hegemony force had advantages the Devourers hadn't expected. Human fighters, small and agile, swarmed between the massive enemy constructs like angry insects, their quantum disruptors cutting through Devourer defenses that were designed to stop larger ships. Meanwhile, hegemony dreadnoughts used their superior shields to anchor the battle line, their ancient weapons carving paths through enemy formations. Zephyrion's ship dove through the chaos like a silver arrow, its crystalline armor deflecting Devourer fire, while its weapons cleared a path toward the Prime Node. The construct was even more massive than Marcus had imagined, a dark sphere covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Initiating boarding sequence, Zephyrion announced. Marcus, the moment you leave this ship, you will be on your own. The node will adapt to any rescue attempt. Understand. The boarding pod was a small vessel designed for exactly this kind of mission. As it detached from Zephyrion's ship and headed for the Prime Node's surface, Marcus felt a strange calm settle over him. This was what his whole life had been building toward. Every repair he'd made, every problem he'd solved, every act of service to others. The pod burrowed through the node's outer shell and deposited him in a corridor that defied human understanding of architecture. The walls flowed like liquid metal, and the air itself seemed to writhe with invisible energy. Marcus activated his scanner and began moving toward what the device indicated was the construct center. The node fought him every step of the way. Walls shifted to block his path, forcing him to cut through with plasma torches. Energy fields tried to disrupt his equipment, requiring constant recalibration. Robotic defenders emerged from hidden alcoves, their forms shifting to counter whatever weapons he brought to bear. But Marcus had spent his entire career dealing with systems that didn't want to cooperate. He rerouted around obstacles, found backup paths when primary routes were blocked, and improvised solutions to problems no human had ever faced before. The skills that had made him a good technician served him well in the heart of an alien nightmare. The node's core was a chamber that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Marcus's brain could process. At its center hung a sphere of pure information, patterns of light, and energy that represented the prime node's consciousness. This was the mind that had been coordinating the Devourer assault, and it was beautiful in a way that made him understand why some weapons were too dangerous to survive their own use. Marcus placed the Void Render at the base of the information sphere and began the activation sequence. The device responded to his commands, its crystalline matrix beginning to resonate with frequencies that touched the edge of reality itself. Impressive, came a voice that seemed to speak directly into his thoughts. A biological intelligence has penetrated to our central core. This was not predicted. Lots of things about humans aren't predictable, Marcus said, continuing his work. That's what makes us dangerous. You will die when the device activates. I know. You gain nothing from this sacrifice. Marcus paused in his work and looked up at the swirling information sphere. I save people I'll never meet. I protect worlds I'll never see. I give younger species the chance to grow up and make their own mistakes instead of being consumed by an ancient weapon. That's not nothing. That's everything. The Prime Node was quiet for a moment. We do not understand. I know, Marcus said, completing the activation sequence. That's why you lose. The Void Render detonated in absolute silence. For a moment that stretched across eternity, Marcus existed in the space between existence and void, watching reality unmake itself in patterns too complex for any mind to follow. In that instant, he saw the connections that bound all living things together, the threads of choice and compassion that made life more than just organized chemistry. Then, the moment ended, and the Prime Node ceased to exist. Across the galaxy, the Devourer fleet stopped as if a switch had been thrown. Without the coordinating intelligence of the Prime Node, the individual ships lost cohesion. Some simply shut down. Others began attacking each other. The majority scattered into deep space, reverting to their pre-coordinated state as separate, manageable threats. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Morrison watched the enemy fleet dissolve into chaos. Commander Park, status report on the Prime Node. Gone, Captain. Complete quantum dissolution. No readings of any kind. Morrison was quiet for a moment. And Chief Chun, Park's voice was thick with grief. No life signs detected. He's gone, Captain. Across the fleet, human and hegemony ships alike observed a moment of silence for the human technician who had saved two civilizations by doing what technicians do best, finding a way to make things work when they were broken. 3 months later, Marcus Chun was posthumously awarded the Hegemony Star of Honor, the first human ever to receive the decoration. The ceremony was held on the new Hegemony Human Joint Station orbiting Earth, where young engineers from both species worked together to build defenses against the next threat that might emerge from the dark. Zephyr Ion spoke at the dedication of the Marcus Chun Memorial Workshop, where technicians from a dozen species would learn to repair and maintain the hybrid technologies that were rapidly becoming the standard throughout civilized space. Marcus Chun showed us that heroism is not about being fearless, the albino dragon said to the assembled crowd. It is about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. It is about seeing a stranger in need and offering help without thought of reward. It is about understanding that the greatest strength comes not from superior weapons or ancient wisdom, but from the simple decision to care about others. He paused, looking up at the stars where human and hegemony ships patrolled together, watching for threats and protecting the innocent. The Devourers consumed matter and energy, but they could not consume the bonds between those who choose to stand together. They could not devour kindness or courage or the willingness of one being to sacrifice for others. These things are stronger than any weapon more enduring than any technology. They are what makes civilization possible, and what make it worth defending. In the years that followed, humanity's expansion into the galaxy accelerated beyond all projections. The partnership with the hegemony opened doors to technologies and alliances that transformed human civilization. But more importantly, it established humanity as a species that others could trust, beings who would keep their word, honor their debts, and stand by their allies no matter the cost. Young human engineers working in a memorial workshop would sometimes ask their hegemony mentors about the man the facility was named for. The dragons would tell them about a technician who once helped an injured stranger, and how that simple act of kindness had ultimately saved the galaxy. But how did he know it would matter so much? The students would ask. He didn't, the dragons would reply. That's what made it matter. He helped because helping was right, not because he expected any reward. That is the difference between mere intelligence and true wisdom. And in the quiet moments between shifts, when the workshop hummed with the sound of species working together to build a better future, those who knew the story would swear they could almost hear an echo of Marcus Chen's voice, still offering guidance to anyone who needed help fixing something that was broken. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers in equal measure. But it was also home to beings who understood that sometimes the greatest victories come not from superior firepower or advanced technology, but from the simple decision to treat others with decency and respect. It was a lesson worth learning and worth passing on to the stars.